Hello, everybody. I am Jax James, NORML's State Policy Manager, here to talk to you guys today a little bit about some of the recently filed legislation. So as you know, about 3 or 4 states have completed their legislative sessions this last year and will be restarting in 2023. So there are a handful of bills in Ohio, New Jersey, and Michigan that are still active for 2022, but we've had a nice little cluster of bills already pre-filed for 2023. And so I want to talk about those today and give you guys a little bit of an update in general. So in the description, you'll find some helpful links that I'll refer to during today's live stream. And I would definitely love to have you guys comment where you are watching from in case I might have some little tidbits of information from there. But I did want to let you guys know that we do have some, priorities that we really focus on during the legislative sessions. So, any legislation that either creates a medical cannabis program for those small handful of states that are left, or create significant improvements. For example, here in Texas, we have a fairly limited medical program, and we are definitely wanting to look to expand it. Of course, any legalization bill we will be working on. And I do want to, just kind of put that out there that there is no perfect bill. And so while we may support a bill, we might also maybe ask for some amendments or something like that. Additionally, there are some states that still do not have decriminalization. And so we're going to work towards reducing penalties, removing criminal penalties, and depenalizing in those states. Of course, the conversation about expungement is always important so that you do not have that record and those collateral consequences following you. Also, conversations having to do with equity and social justice and how that impacts the cannabis space. And then lastly, focusing on patient employment, workplace protections for those that are medical and adult use patients. So those are the types of legislation that we really are going to be focusing on in 2023. Those will be our priorities. And so let me go ahead and start with some upcoming legislation that has been pre-filed. So pre-filed means that before the session starts, they go ahead and they author these bills as their intent to file, right? And so you'll have the text to look at. Usually pre-filed bills have a higher likelihood of passing, at least in Texas and most states. And also it allows them to really work to get co-sponsors leading up to the crunch of the session. So the first one that I would like to start talking about that has been pre-filed is in Missouri. So as you guys know, Missouri legalized cannabis this last election cycle, and they will be starting their legislative session soon. And House Bill 295 was filed. And what it wants to do is establish an offense for possessing an open container of marijuana in motor vehicle. Now, we often see open container laws having to do with alcohol. And so this is kind of a normal thing to see out there. However, it penalizes as a Class A misdemeanor, which is the harshest, most severe misdemeanor classification, and harsher than some of the other open container laws in Missouri. So there's also the conversation of, does the constitutional protections deem this unconstitutional since they can possess this? It doesn't address specifically how people would transport homegrown cannabis. So definitely some legislation for you to look at in Missouri. That's House Bill 295, seeking to create an offense for possessing an open container of marijuana in your car. Just going to check on the comments real quick. Philadelphia, Virginia, Massachusetts. All right, awesome. Thanks for joining, guys. I know Philadelphia is having some legislation pre-filed there, so definitely check out Virginia NORML. They are very on top of their stuff there. In Pennsylvania, I know that there's a lot of conversation of legalization this upcoming year because of the way that the chamber dynamics have changed, so definitely stay tuned there. In Massachusetts, last time around, we saw a big effort to put THC caps and limits on items. So I do anticipate we might see things like that again. So definitely stay tuned for more bills out of those states. Now, there is also a pre-filed bill in New Jersey that has to do with medical cannabis. Excuse me. It is starting to be cedar fever season down here in Texas, and It's a hot mess. So in New Jersey, there's companion bills, Assembly Bill 4994 and Senate Bill 3394, and they would allow for medical cannabis for those that have sickle cell anemia. And so currently, New Jersey doctors are not allowed to recommend, nor are residents able to lawfully use cannabis to treat sickle cell anemia. So that would add sickle cell anemia as a qualifying condition in New Jersey. Definitely hope to see more legislation out of there to continue to make improvements. Now, in South Carolina, there were 3 bills filed, mostly having to do with medical cannabis. House Bill 3486 wants to authorize medical cannabis use for for broad use. It's the Patient Care Act, currently, South Carolinians cannot possess medical cannabis, and if it were to pass, it would be very groundbreaking. So this is an important bill, 3486. An additional medical bill would decriminalize medical possession for veterans who have PTSD, and that's House Bill 3135. The bill would recognize the fact that South Carolina shouldn't criminalize the one treatment that may alleviate some of these effects of PTSD for combat veterans. It would allow anyone to possess 28 grams to 1 ounce. And so that is important legislation there. Of course, a more robust medical bill passing would be ideal, so it can be inclusive, but definitely an important bit of legislation. The next bill I want to discuss out of South Carolina is 3226. It would authorize the use of medical marijuana, but also put into effect a bunch of protections for patients, caregivers, and physicians. But it would also prohibit schools, landlords, and employers from discriminating against the medical use of cannabis. 78% of South Carolinians favor legalized medical marijuana. And so definitely this is by far one of the best bills that has been pre-filed in South Carolina. Now, other state that has had some pre-filed legislation is my home state here in Texas, and it's been just over a dozen bills. There are 2 bills having to do with expanding the medical cannabis program here in Texas. Both have been filed in the Senate, having to do with cultivation and research and with delivery as well. So if you go to texasnormal.org, you can click on the tab for 88th Texas Legislature, and we'll have the full list of bills there that have been filed along with the accompanying action alerts. There is also some legislation in Texas to reduce penalties, quite a clutch of bills. By far, not the most bills filed yet, but we're on our way. But one of the bills I wanted to highlight was HB 218 from Representative Moody. It would reduce the penalties for flower possession, concentrate possession, and paraphernalia possession. It also has an expungement carve out in it. So that is a really quality bill. Of course, Representative Moody has been a stalwart cannabis patron at the Capitol, really pushing forward these conversations. But again, you can go to texasnormal.org and click on that 88th ledge and look at the about 8 different bills that have to do with reducing penalties. There's also legislation to legalize marijuana. There's 2 types of legislation that have been filed in Texas. So the first is a regular Senate bill, and it does have to do with all of the, home cultivation and all of those aspects. But I wanted to kind of talk about the differences in bills. So in Texas, our legislature meets for 140 days every 2 years, and we have to change our marijuana laws at the state level. Now, there are some local initiatives and deprioritization efforts and first chance programs and discretion at the local level where people try to stop the bleeding. But to truly change the law, we have to do it at the state level. And Texas is one of about half of the states in the country that do not have the ability to collect signatures at the state level to get something on the ballot. So what you have to do is you have to have a joint resolution filed. Pun not intended, but very appropriate. And a joint resolution is a legislative measure that is used to propose amendments to the Texas Constitution. It requires a supermajority in both chambers of the legislature to be adopted, but it doesn't require action by the governor. Before it becomes effective, the provisions of the joint resolution that proposes the amendments to the Constitution have to be approved by the voters. So essentially, a legislator authors this joint resolution. It has to pass both chambers by a supermajority. Then it has to pass with the voters in Texas. And then it comes back to the legislature for them to carve out the different statutes surrounding that. So it is a lengthy process, but there is a joint resolution that has been filed in the Senate. So that's that. I did want to let you guys know that next week I will be back on Tuesday, our new time and place, and I'll have Morgan with me. Morgan will be giving a federal update on what's going on. We will be close to the end of the lame duck session then, and so it'll be really kind of a summary for the year for that. But I did want to let you know that in between now and then, you can go to normal.org/act. And at the top of that page right there, we've got several action alerts that you can participate in. And they're at the federal level at the top. And then you'll see a state map below it. And that's a dynamic map. If you hover over your state, it will show if there's any currently filed legislation in your state and any links for action alerts as well. So one of the best pages to bookmark for this upcoming legislative session is going to be normal.org/act. And then also I encourage anyone who hasn't already engaged with your local chapter to go to our chapters page and check out and see if there's one in your city or state. If there's not, of course, there's a way to apply. There are a handful of states that don't have chapters, and we would love to fill it out. I'm going to come back to the comments real quick before I close everything out here and see if there's any more questions or states that I might have information on. Let's see. All right. I'm not seeing any questions here. So I will see you guys next Tuesday. We will have a state and federal update. Then we will have a brief hiatus over the holidays and come back in the beginning of January to talk about really these legislative sessions that are going to start kicking off across the country. I encourage you to go to normal.org/act to participate in our federal and local action alerts there. And of course, end of year giving is coming up, so you can donate to either the NORML Foundation for a tax deductible donation or to NORML in general so that we can use it for lobbying and other efforts that we have. And I just want to thank all of you guys for tuning in today and participating in these action alerts. It's really important that we all are participating and in continuing to either create or perfect these types of legislation across the country. So on that note, guys, I am going to say, have a great Tuesday, and I will see you next Tuesday.